Actually, telling the narrative has been somewhat challenging. As someone who has spent a lot of time listening to or watching actual horror stories on YouTube, I've frequently pondered why somebody would want to share a tale of tragedy for the sake of entertainment. Realizing it's about more than just entertainment, I finally chose to tell it. As an added bonus, it's a great way to assist others who may be going through the same thing. My tale unfolded over a decade ago. We were childhood friends, Jake and I. Throughout my entire life, we have been inseparable pals. We were best friends at school. We sat next to each other, played video games and spent playtime hanging out. We were quite near. We were so close that we chose to attend the same university. I believe Jake was capable of getting into a better school than I was, but he shared my desire to spend the experience with me. We turned our departure for college into a road trip when we left a few days before our arrival date. It was quite an experience since Jake and I had never driven that much of a distance before, and we allotted ourselves 3 days to drive there. We figured it would be fun to take in the sights of the countryside before getting down to business with our schoolwork. We were traversing mountainous terrain on the second day of our journey. Plus, I'd never done it before, so it was an entirely novel experience. It was probably the altitude, but I felt nauseous much of the time. But then the day came to a close, and the car broke down. It seized up on me as I was driving, and I couldn't even get it off the road. Neither Jake nor I could decide what to do with the vehicle. We were completely unprepared for that. Furthermore, we had no idea how far away a petrol station was and were in an area with poor cell phone reception. So, we made the decision for one of us to go to a petrol station and ask for assistance by hitchhiking. Because the vehicle and its trailer contained all of our possessions, we were forced to remain in one vehicle. Jake made up his mind that he would personally seek assistance. A call finally came to get him after some time had passed. There was very little light remaining by that time, so I did nothing more than sit in the driver's seat and waited. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I struck up a conversation with a state trooper who had pulled up to my car. I filled him in on the situation and told him that my friend had tried to get aid via hitchhiking. After gathering some details, he offered to go check on my acquaintance at the petrol station. It turns out that there was a petrol station with a garage approximately 30 miles distant that could have offered to tow our vehicle. I informed the police that it had been more than 3 hours when he inquired as to how long I had been waiting. My friend's car could have made 3 trips to the petrol station, retrieved the tow truck, and returned in that amount of time. I was worried when the cop departed, and my worries multiplied when he was absent for an extended period of time. The sky was overcast, and I experienced complete solitude for the very first time. It was a strange and uncomfortable sensation, and I had the uneasy impression that the officer's return would bring bad news. The officer did not return for almost 2 hours. I breathed a sigh of relief when he arrived with the tow truck. Jake had to be with them, I thought to myself. But Jake wasn't in the car with the cop when he returned to my. Nothing had happened at the petrol station, he told me. Nobody had gotten a tow. Even though he asked about, nobody could recall seeing the vehicle with Jake in it. The vehicle was then towed, and I was compelled to visit the police station in order to submit a report while its repair. They had to notify Jake's parents that he was missing by calling them. I reserved a room at a nearby motel. Because I was concerned about my friend, I postponed the trip. For 4 days, I hid away in a motel, terrified that I may lose touch with my friend Jake. The police finally arrived to speak with me. A grocery store parking lot was where Jake's automobile was located after he had gotten a ride. The trunk contained Jake. He remained conscious despite being undressed, battered, and covered in blood. About a month passed before he regained consciousness. Even then, it took weeks before he could recognize anyone, including myself, and it took even longer before he could remember what had happened. I won't spill the beans, but the individuals who had taken him were robbed of the automobile they were riding in. They took his cash, credit cards, and even his cell phone. The credit cards were the real reason they were apprehended. Out of the two individuals, one remains incarcerated. That year, I didn't enroll in college, but I'm pleased to report that Jake and I were able to enroll in college together the following fall. We took to the skies this time, though, and his folks joined us as well. We are best friends to this day, having roomed together for all 4 years. It is never a good idea to hitchhike. My friend would have avoided this whole ordeal if Jake and I had just waited for the police to find us. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night. About 2 hours passed throughout the drive. I had to return to work the next day, so I didn't spend the night. The majority of the journey was along roads flanked by thick forests and shrubs, the kind of foreboding scenery you often see in films. In any case, I was beginning to feel really exhausted after driving for 45 minutes. You know, sometimes extreme fatigue strikes seemingly out of nowhere. That is exactly what occurred to me. Even though I was sure I wouldn't be able to stay, I couldn't find a spot to park and sleep in peace. My exhaustion and inability to locate a parking spot led me to do something dubious. Anyway, I drew over into the shoulder of the road, onto the grass, and crouched behind some shrubs in an effort to evade anyone else who might be passing by. Before I went to sleep, I mentally noted that it was 11:22. A scratching sound roused me at some point afterwards. It was 11:50 when I checked the time. A few seconds later, the noise ceased. I didn't bother to glance around. I just went back to sleep because I was still so exhausted. It had become 12:40 when the same sound roused me from my slumber. This time, the constant noise actually frightened me. Why would it come back nearly an hour after it had gone? I briefly considered the possibility that it was just an animal checking out the vehicle. In my rearview mirror, I saw a fleeting sight of an animal darting into the woods. In my ignorance, I had assumed it was the same assassin who had scratched the couple's car and then brutally murdered the man who had gone outside to find out what had happened. That's my inner monologue. Consequently, I bolted from that place. As I rounded the corner, which was about 100 yards up the road, I noticed a parked automobile with the driver's door ajar. I decelerated so I could peer inside and check if anyone was there. Not at all. My next stop was at the rearview mirror. Out of nowhere, this man comes racing around the bend, and I hadn't noticed a thing. He then begins yelling obscenities at me, such as, "Hey you need to get out of your vehicle immediately." I quickly left after giving it a quick nod. The man remained a mystery to me. The takeaway here is that you shouldn't rest your head on the shoulder of a lonely road. From 29 Palms, California, I was making my way to Albuquerque, New Mexico, taking a side road. The lonely high desert east of Los Angeles is where you'll find 29 Palms. Except for the part where it went through Amboy, California, The bypass was 2 lanes across narrow wasteland. A salt-flat and a dormant volcano border one side of the practically deserted town of Amboy, which is located almost as deep below sea level as Death Valley. There was a lot of satanic group activity going on there as well. Consequently, I was out on my own in the afternoon. I decided to stop in Amboy and take a picture of the city sign as a proof of existence to my pals who had dared me to travel that way to I-40. I hopped back in my vehicle and headed towards the mountains that lie between Amboy and I-40. After cresting the peak, I continued north through a canyon surrounded by tall grass. I noticed some objects in the center of the road up ahead. The sight of a red Pontiac Fiero parked in the middle of the road, obstructing both lanes, a man and a woman's lifeless bodies lying face down in the road, and an open bag with clothes strewn around horrified me. At a distance of around 100 feet, I came to a complete halt, and a shiver ran down my spine. I chambered a round from a 9mm handgun that I had retrieved from under the seat, as befits a Marine. There was a distinct air of mischief. Everything seemed orchestrated, like an ambush, since everything was so flawless. Had I gone crazy? There has to be a mistake. There was no way I could get out of the vehicle. That was a move straight out of a horror flick. Looking over the road, I noticed a possible path that I could follow. I could go past the man on his left, veer to the right to avoid the woman following the Fiero, and then return on the opposite side. After shifting into first gear, I punched it and proceeded down the route I had plotted out. I avoided colliding with the Fiero or the 2 bodies in the road as I went around its rear end. Just a few hundred feet ahead, I slowed down to give my heart a break and breathe. I glanced into the rearview mirror and noticed that the 2 corpses had knelt down, and about 20 individuals had come out of the dense grass on either side of the road, near the automobiles and the corpse. Suddenly, my right foot pounded the accelerator, and I didn't release it until I needed to reduce my speed for the I-40 East on-ramp. Had I stepped out of the vehicle to examine the bodies or brought my vehicle closer to them, I will never know the outcome. It seems like it wouldn't have been a good idea to me. When compared to fictional depictions, real life can occasionally be more terrifying.